group gathers at the steps of the Vancouver Art Gallery, opposing the United States operation in Venezuela.
And Prime Minister Mark Carney also releasing a statement yesterday on Venezuela. In it, he welcomes the opportunity for freedom and democracy. He says, in part, quote, in keeping with our long-standing commitment to upholding the rule of law, sovereignty, and human rights, Canada calls on all parties to respect international law.
Something unusual happens when power moves too fast. One moment, the world is following familiar patterns, alliances, statements, protocols, and the next, those patterns fracture. Aircraft appear where diplomats once stood. Announcements replace negotiations. Decisions are revealed, not discussed. And while attention rushes toward the shock itself, the real shift happens somewhere quieter. Because while Washington acts, Ottawa pauses. Late Friday evening, as reports of military action dominate global feeds, analysts instinctively look south. They watch statements coming out of the White House. They parse language, tone, intent. Most assume alignment will follow. It always has before. Canada, after all, is expected to echo. But the real story doesn't begin in Washington. It begins hours later, further north, behind closed doors, where speed is deliberately avoided. In Ottawa, no victory language appears, no celebratory framing, no endorsement of force. Instead, something older and less dramatic emerges, a careful reaffirmation of principles that rarely trend but quietly shape outcomes over time.
Having the opportunity for a change is definitely something that we welcome. It's going to be a long road. We know that. So we're prepared, but it's a step in that direction.
This is where modern power reveals its split personality. One version moves fast, announces loudly, and relies on the visibility of action. The other moves slowly, speaks cautiously, and depends on whether others believe it will still be there tomorrow. The difference matters more now than it did a decade ago. In Washington, the language is decisive. Statements emphasize control, authority, and immediate results. The assumption is simple. Credibility comes from capability. If you can act, you lead. If you hesitate, you fall behind. But in Ottawa, the framing is different. The emphasis shifts toward process rather than outcome, legitimacy rather than leverage, coordination rather than command. The language avoids absolutes. It resists urgency. It sounds almost understated, until you realize how deliberate that understatement is. This contrast is not accidental. It reflects two philosophies of global leadership that are increasingly diverging. One treats international order as something enforced. The other treats it as something maintained. In the American model, power is proven through action. In the Canadian model, power is preserved through consistency. Neither approach announces itself as ideology. Both present as pragmatism. But the difference shows up in moments of crisis, when speed and restraint are both options, and only one is chosen. As reactions ripple across capitals, allies quietly recalibrate. Not publicly, not dramatically, but internally, questions surface. What happens after the announcement? What happens when attention moves on? Who remains engaged when headlines fade? This is where unpredictability becomes expensive. Markets dislike it. Institutions struggle with it. Partners hedge against it. Not because action is wrong, but because inconsistency compounds risk. Canada's response avoids confrontation, but it also avoids submission. It does not reject the goal of democratic outcomes. It does not defend illegitimate authority. Instead, it reframes the method, emphasizing international law, multilateral engagement, and the agency of local populations. This is not weakness, it is insulation. By refusing to escalate language, Ottawa preserves room to maneuver later. By refusing to personalize the moment, it avoids being pulled into someone else's timeline. Silence, in this context, becomes strategic. What is not said matters as much as what is. There is no condemnation, but no endorsement either. No applause, no outrage. Just continuity. And continuity, in geopolitics, is increasingly rare. For decades, Canada has positioned itself as predictable. Not dominant, Not theatrical, predictable. The kind of actor others can plan around. The kind of partner whose commitments outlast election cycles and news cycles. That reputation didn't appear overnight. It was built slowly, through unglamorous decisions. Refugee resettlement, coalition diplomacy, legal consistency, institutional participation. In moments like this, that investment pays quiet dividends. Because while force creates immediate leverage, trust creates optionality. Countries watching this moment are not choosing sides publicly. They are choosing models privately. They are asking which system absorbs shocks better, which approach produces fewer surprises, which partner remains steady when pressure rises. The contrast sharpens further when you examine how leadership is exercised. One approach treats leadership as direction, issuing commands, setting terms, defining outcomes. The other treats leadership as coordination, aligning expectations, reinforcing norms, sustaining frameworks. Direction is visible, coordination is durable. In Ottawa, the emphasis remains on multilateral pathways, on legal legitimacy, on shared responsibility. These phrases may sound procedural, even dull, but they signal something important to other governments: reliability. Not moral superiority, reliability. Meanwhile, Washington's approach commands attention but creates uncertainty. Allies wonder whether commitments will hold, whether positions will shift, whether today's decision will be tomorrow's reversal. This doesn't erase American power, it complicates it. Power without predictability forces partners to build contingencies, and contingencies dilute influence. What we are watching is not a rupture, but a rebalancing. Canada is not challenging American strength. It is offering an alternative currency of influence, one based on steadiness rather than spectacle. This is why reactions in Washington are uneasy rather than hostile. The concern is not disagreement, it is contrast. Because when restraint looks competent, speed looks reckless by comparison. When patience appears intentional, urgency appears impulsive. And when silence communicates confidence, noise begins to feel defensive. None of this requires slogans. None of it requires confrontation. The shift happens quietly in how statements are worded, how timing is managed, how alignment is expressed without dependency. This is modern geopolitics at work, not as a clash of flags, but as a competition of operating systems. One runs on immediacy, the other runs on continuity. Neither wins overnight, but over time, one accumulates trust, and trust compounds. As the situation evolves, attention will return to Washington.